I want you to turn, there's so many scriptures. I mean, I've got so many scriptures in this message today, but I would love for you to turn to Proverbs Chapter 10. Proverbs Chapter 10, because there's one there I really want you to see, but if you're a note taker, you're going to love today. If you love the Bible, you're going to love today. If you don't love the Bible, I'm going to end up helping you love the Bible, okay? So we're going to help you today, but I'm going to finish up our series. We've been in this series called, it's called God Will Provide, I Think. God Will Provide, I Think. And the reality of it is this, we've basically been in this dynamic where we've been discovering that God, one of his most enduring promises is to provide for us. But the reality of living as a believer is sometimes we can claim these promises, but yet not live them. Meaning we can say with our mouths we believe he's going to provide, but then we still have unrest in our hearts because we're worried about his provision. And so the goal of this series has been to convince you God keeps his promises to provide, and at the exact same side, that you can live in those promises even before you see them, even before you get the job, even before you experience them, that you can rest in that God is going to provide because it's his nature and he's made you that promise. So the thing about provision, though, is I can't talk about a provision without talking about money. And so today I want to finish up the series with talking to you about money, and many of your prayers probably have been about money when it comes to God's provision. And so I want to explain to you today 3 blessings that God offers for your finances. 3 blessings God offers for your finances. And I just want to say kind of up front, I realize that for many people, the idea of talking about money in church is an uncomfortable thing. And I get that. But I really felt compelled to share this with you for this reason. I care for you. And these 3 things, these 3 blessings are something Kayla and I have lived. We've experienced them, so they're tested and tried. But I just don't believe that I can honestly say I care for you if I wouldn't share this with you. That I just believe if I really care about you, your family, and obviously such a big part of your life financially, that if I didn't say this, I just couldn't live up to the idea that I want to pastor you and I care for you. And so it's all out of that heart today. Now, when I say there are 3 blessings, blessing is a pretty, churchy word, but it's an important word. And so let me give you a little definition of kind of how to think about blessing. Blessing is simply supernatural power working for you, as in cursing is just supernatural power working against you. So a blessing just means that God is working behind the scenes, maybe in ways you couldn't see, to bless you, to help you with his supernatural power. And at the same time, cursing is just when there's supernatural power working against you. Now, let me explain it this way. It's such a big deal that without God's blessing, I firmly believe this, that you could make double what you make now and still not have enough. Without God's blessing, I believe you could be extremely skilled and have a ton of experience and still be overlooked for promotions. I think without God's blessing, you could end up working your entire life very hard and always live with financial pressure because you don't have blessing on your life. At the same time, I think with blessing, because there's supernatural power working for you, with blessing, I believe that you actually could have limited skill and less experience and be promoted well beyond what you should. I think with blessing, you could actually make less than you make now and still have enough. I think with blessing, you could come from a family that has always known financial pressure and you could escape that and never know it a day in your life. I believe that that's what a big deal it is. And that's why Proverbs 10:22 says a verse that I love this version. It's the Living Bible, and it says it this way: the Lord's blessing is our greatest wealth. It's our greatest wealth. All our work adds nothing to it. So here's what that's saying. You could work your whole life and still you could not produce what God's blessing on your life could produce. And so I want to talk to you about it because obviously if that's true, all of us are asking, well, what can I do then to have God's blessing? And so I want to tell you a story to kind of just help you see how much God wants to see this in your life. I was recently at a friend's house. We stayed there for a few weeks and a few days a few weeks ago. And Kayla and I, they just had this beautiful backyard. I mean, beautiful, multiple layers and rocks and there are ferns and trees and flowers. I mean, just beautiful. And it was so beautiful. I thought, man, this is like the Garden of Eden. And I was almost going to walk around naked, but that's how you lose friends, so I didn't do that. But I had lunch with him and I said, how did this happen? Like, how did you end up? I mean, this is beautiful. And he's like got a green thumb. I'm the black hand. You know, I want to know, how did you do this? And he said, oh, it's simple. He said, listen, growth is natural when you do the right things. Growth's just natural when you do the right things. And I thought to myself, the blessing of God is not something that's only for people he just loves or like that are special. The blessing of God is a natural product for people who just do things the right way according to God's word. See, you don't have to convince God to bless you. He's already said he wants to. As a matter of fact, he said that he wants to do it in the fact that he said he wants to be your provider in every way, shape, or form. He's promised to do it. He says, and he's capable of it. I mean, the Bible says the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. There's no resource he doesn't have in order to provide for you. And he wants to do it. He says, I take care of the birds, and they're so seemingly simple, but I make sure they have everything. How much more do I, as your heavenly Father, want to do this for you? So listen, God's blessing is a natural byproduct when we just simply do the right things and align ourselves with his word. And so today, I'm just going to give you 3 simple blessings that he offers in Scripture. I'm going to tell you how to align yourself with them so that he can release them in your life because he wants to do it. But here's the thing. They're given because at the time in human history God's word was given, they're given in an agrarian culture. And so we're going to look at them through an agricultural lens because I think you get a little more out of it that way. Now, let me say this. This is important because I don't plant my broccoli, I buy it. So there's some things that sometimes I miss not being familiar with agriculture. Listen, I don't grow my cauliflower, I throw it in the trash. And so the reality is sometimes it helps to look at it from a different angle, okay? Here's the very first one, very first blessing, the blessing of the first fruit, the blessing of the first fruit. This is how God says, I'll release a blessing when you handle your first fruit the right way. And God's very eager to do this. As a matter of fact, you can tell he's eager because he mentions it so many times. Book of Exodus alone, he mentions it 16 times. And then he gets real detailed about how to handle your first fruit. It's not just like this principle, it's specific. I pulled 3 scriptures just because I want you to see it. He tells us the amount that a first fruit is. In 2 Chronicles 31:5, he says, as soon as the order went out, the Israelites generously gave the first fruits of their grain, new wine, olive oil, honey, and all that the field produced, and they brought a great amount, a tithe of everything. Tithe means tenth, so the first fruit is 10% of your income. That's what it is, 10% according to God's standard. He also gives the location you should give it. Exodus 23:19, he says, for the first of the first fruits of your land, you shall bring into the house of the Lord your God. So he says, it's not just 10% to wherever you want. It's not just 10% to whatever you see in front of you. It's 10% to the local church, to God's house. And then the last one is, he says it's extremely important. Not like just important for us. He finds it extremely important. Because he says in Leviticus 27:30, and all the tithe of the land, whether the seed of the land or the fruit of the tree, is the Lord's. And this last part just catches you. It is holy. Like it's holy to him. Like of the utmost of importance. Set apart. Completely perfect, whole in every way to him. It's holy. Okay, now I want you to get this. You don't probably get paid in produce, would be my guess. I mean, some of you are like, I make peanuts, but no, maybe not like apples necessarily. And so I want to explain to you this first fruits concept, that God puts so much value on it. So let's assume that this is your income. Now, this could be your income from, a month. Some of you make this much in a month. Some of you make this much in a year. It doesn't matter. This is just your income. There's roughly about 140 apples in this wheelbarrow. And what God comes to us is he says, I'm going to give this to you. This is all yours. So this is yours. This is your income. And then he comes back and he says, I want you to give me 10% of it. I want you to give me 10% of it, which would be roughly about 14 apples. So he wants us to bring out 14 apples. And here's the thing. There we go. These apples are really light because they're fake. And so I'll make sure they're not falling everywhere. But here's the deal. He says, I want 14 of them. That's it. So God says, I'm going to give you all this, and then I'm going to ask for you to give me back 10% of them. Now, immediately, like when I said money today, and this came up, many of you are like, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Some of you don't want to do it because you don't feel like you can. Some of you don't want to do it because you feel like, this is just like it's not a good time. And then let's just be real honest. Some of us don't want to do it because, well, bless God, they're my apples. I mean, they're mine. I mean, I don't want to spend 10% of my apples here. And here's what I would say. I get why you feel that way, but I also want to just be very clear. Technically, they're all God's apples. They're all his apples. You know, no. My name's on the paycheck stub. They're my apples. No. See, God gives your company the ability to be profitable, and he made the connection for you to even get the job. And by the way, the breath you had in your lungs the last time you got a paycheck for doing that job, that came from him too. So technically, they're all his apples. But he puts them in our hand as a test, an opportunity to invite us into being blessed. Now we say, well, but why? Why does God, is there a fruit shortage in heaven? Why? Why does God need this many apples? Well, let me say, there's no fruit shortage in heaven. There's not. As a matter of fact, God's not even interested in 10% of your apples at all. He's not interested in any of that, actually. He's not in it for fruit. He's in it for faith. God doesn't just want 10% of the apples, although can we all agree that, if it's all God's and he can have it all, the fact that he just wants this and he's left us with this, that's pretty reasonable of God, right? So it's not like we're talking about, man, God, we're splitting hairs. There's a lot of apples here that left with. But even beyond that, God doesn't want 10%. He wants the first 10% because he wants faith. See, if you were a farmer in ancient Israel, you would have grown your crop and then you would have brought 10% of that harvest to the temple. But the thing about being a farmer is this, you don't control a lot of what you depend on. You don't control rainfall, you don't control pestilence, you don't control kind of how much of the seed produces. And so to give up 10% meant to give it without knowing how the rest of the harvest would come in. So you gave it in faith, trusting for God to do something with what's left. That's the reason you can give 10% and actually not be a part of this blessing. Because if the 10% you give is after you've paid everybody else and it's what's left over, God doesn't get any faith out of it. That's the reason it's important to pay the 10% before the mortgage, before the car payment, before the Netflix account, because then God says, I see you're putting me as priority, and I see that you're doing it before you see how the rest is going to work out, and you're giving me faith. See, if you really want to sum tithing up, you could do it with 3 words. Tithing is trusting. Tithing is trusting. That's all it is. It's saying, God, I trust you to be first and foremost, that what me giving you this 10%, somehow you'll make up what's left. And that's the power of tithing, actually, because what God says is if you give me the first fruit, I'll bless the fruit that's left. You say, well, what do you mean you'll bless it? Let me show it to you. Proverbs 3, starting with verse 9 and 10, it says, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of your produce. And then verse 10 says, then. Everybody say, then? Then your barns will be filled and your vats will be bursting forth. Okay, I got a question for you. This is confusing. How can you give 10% of something and then it be filled? I get your God, but your arithmetic's off here. Because if I give 10% of something, it's not full, it's 90% full. So how is it you can give 10%, the first fruit, and yet it's filled? It's because the blessing's released. God says that when my blessing is on you, you can do more with 90% as though it was filled than you can if you would have kept all 100% and me not be involved. And that was what they called the power of the second harvest. According to Levitical law, if you brought your first fruits, even though you didn't, and you took that 10% and brought it to the temple, that when your second harvest came in, God would replace what had been given and given you more. He would bless what was left to produce more than what you had given in return. Listen, that's what God offers to do. God didn't create tithing for his sake. He created it for our sake. See, it's an invitation to be blessed. It's an invitation to be blessed. He says, if you'll tithe, if you'll put your first fruits first, you give me that faith, you release the faith, I release the blessing. And that blessing comes in the form of a provision, but it comes in the form of knowledge and discipline and understanding. He says, it will be like I opened up communication between you and heaven. You will all of a sudden handle money in a completely different way, and it won't be by earth standard, it'll be by us. Listen, he says, you'll be able to experience the second harvest. See, the reason some of you make more than you ever made, but you struggle more than you ever struggled, is because your second harvest isn't blessed. You use the first harvest and then you also run out in the second harvest. But for people who end up making God first in their first fruits, the second harvest always replaces what they needed. Now, let me say it this way. I think this is the convincing point. God believes so much in the power of this blessing, he practices it himself. God believes so much in the power of the first blessing the rest that he practices himself. Because Jesus was a first fruits offering. Jesus was a first fruits offering. Let me give you an example. Jesus was the firstborn of all of God's children. Jesus was put into the hands of the temple priest that they would do what they saw fit with him. Jesus was given in faith. Jesus went to the cross with no guarantee that you or I would ever choose to follow him, so he was given in faith. Like the first fruits, Jesus is holy. And here's the last part. Because Jesus went first, the rest of us live in an eternal and abundant blessing when we follow him. He, because of his obedience, blessed the rest that remained. So here's what I'm saying. If God himself practices this, how much more do you think it could help your finances? It's a powerful principle. Here's the second one. The second one's the blessing of sowing. Now, I know the idea of sowing and reaping has been misused by a lot of preachers. We've all seen them at 3 a.m., when we can't sleep, and they misuse it. But I do want to warn you, don't get rid of a scriptural truth just because of man's abuse. There's a scriptural truth there. And I'll read it to you. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 9, starting in verse 6. It says, "Remember this, a farmer who plants only a few seeds will get a small crop, but the one who plants generously will get a generous crop. You must each decide." So he says, this is different. You don't decide the first fruits I decide. He says, the sowing, you decide what you want to do with it. And he says, now, and don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure, for God loves a person who gives cheerfully. Now let me just say, God loves when you give and you're mad about it too, because God loves everybody. So he loves cheerful people. You're mad today and you give, God still loves you. Now, and he says, and God will generously provide all you need. Then you will have everything you need and plenty left over to share with others. Verse 10, for God is the one who provides the seed to the farmer and the bread to eat. In the same way, he will provide two things: increase to your resources and produce in you a harvest of generosity. A harvest of generosity. Two things you get if you do this right. Let me be very clear. First fruits is a command to obey from God's word. So if I choose not to give my first fruits, it's not that I didn't choose to do it, it's that I'm disobedient. But sowing is an invitation to experience God's hand in your life. See, sowing is an invitation from God to experience his miraculous movement in your life. It's for people who want to move from their faith being theoretical to experiential. It's God saying, I'll let you decide how much of the miraculous that I can do you want to see in your life. I'll leave it up to you. And that's because anybody who's ever had seed realizes they got a lot of options. Like, this is a pound of corn. So I have 3 options with this corn. The first option is I can grind it up and turn it into meal and make something I can consume it. And by the way, that's what culture tells us to do with our seed, is consume it, buy it, Amazon it, consume all of it. I just want to say this to you, that obviously you're going to consume part of your seed, but I want to be so clear, you're never going to experience heaven's miracles on earth's mindset. So it's so important that you realize that the way you look at this matters a great deal, because God's inviting you into seeing the miraculous. The second thing you could do with it is just save it and store it, which saving is a very God-centered value. It's all through Scripture. And here's the thing, though. Sometimes what we call saving is actually just masking a heart of greed. So your saving and your sowing should actually be proportional to one another, that you should live a generous life, not just storing it all in the name of being a good steward, but actually both being active. And then the last thing you could do is you could plant it. And that's where the fun happens, because then it multiplies. See, you can put this in the ground. It's a pound of corn. And then this pound of corn will produce roughly 800 pounds of corn in a year. So this 1 pound will produce about an 800-pound harvest. And then if you planted that 800 pounds, in a second year, you would actually produce about 639,000 pounds of corn. So 800 pounds turns into 639,000 pounds of corn. And then if you went a third year and planted that 639,000 pounds would actually produce 512 million pounds, which is enough to fill this room about 36 times. So this is all I'm saying. 1 pound of seed has the potential to create hundreds of millions of pounds of seed because there's a multiplication on every seed. And there's a multiplication on every seed you've ever sown to a single mom, every seed you've ever sown to a missionary, every seed you've ever sown to someone at your office that God prompted your heart to just bless them. There's been a multiplication on it. And you just thought it was a seed. But God takes it and blesses it. What does he do? Well, he says, I'll do 2 things. He says, I'm going to, 1, give you more seed. We don't ever give to get. Never our motivation. At the same time, you cannot give to God without him rewarding it because he will owe no one. And so God will bless you with more seed. Notice it doesn't say God gives seed to the keeper. It says God gives seed to the sower. But the other multiplication comes that it impacts people's lives in a great way. That it does more eternal. So one way he said, I'll multiply it in earth, but he said, I'll also multiply it in eternity. Somebody wrote me an email recently about that miracle in their life. Last year, you remember, we expanded to a Jefferson County campus, and I invited you as a church to help support that by sowing something into it, by giving an offering. Well, this couple had been a part of our church for a long time, great people, faithful in their first fruits, but they said they weren't going to participate in giving something for our Jefferson County campus. And the reason they weren't going to do that is because they had some specific goals. In the next 12 months, they wanted to be out of debt, and they wanted to be able, that she could stay home with their son and their coming daughter, the daughter that they were expecting. And so they were going to pass on the opportunity to help launch the campus, and that's fine. But the closer they got, they said the Holy Spirit kept drawing them in to being a part of the miracle. They didn't want to miss it. They wanted to be a part. And so on the day that we took pledges, they filled out a pledge card, and they said, we gave way more than we knew we should have, but we just felt like that's what God wanted us to do. And so they wrote that, and then they went home and made this super strict budget because they were trying to see if they could still possibly meet their goal. They didn't think they would be able to. But then the multiplication started. Within a few weeks of after committing to that, the first thing that happened is that there was an unexpected bonus that came out of nowhere that he received at his job. And that created a little breathing room. And then a few weeks after that, their child care changed to where they were paying for child care, but they lost their spot. And so they asked a family member if by chance they could help them out. And the family member said, absolutely. And they said, okay, well, we'll pay you. The family member said, no, you're not going to pay me. I want to bless you guys. And so they went from paying for child care to not paying with child care at all. So they were able to put that on their debt. Then a few weeks after that, her office threw her a baby shower. And she said the baby shower was one day, but she said for the next 3 weeks, every day, there were gifts on her desk. They so blessed her. And as a matter of fact, they gave her so much stuff that they had set aside money for the new baby, and instead they didn't have to actually use that money, and they used it to cover her unpaid paternal leave. And then a few months after that, he got an unexpected promotion and was given a raise. And so she wrote me this and said, so 1 year later, Pastor, she said, our baby has everything it needs. We have completely paid off our student loans. We were able to keep our pledge to the church, and this Thursday is my last day at work. God did everything we asked him to do. Now, that's awesome. The math doesn't work on that. But remember I told you that there's an earthly multiplication. There's also a eternal. What she didn't list in there were the 150 plus people who have been saved at Jefferson County since we opened that campus. Because when we put seed in the ground, God multiplies it. Now here's the last one. Last one's this. There's a blessing of a vineyard. A blessing of a vineyard. God doesn't want to just give you fruit. He doesn't want to just give you seed. He wants to bless you with a vineyard. Something so large, I could not fit it in here, so I just got a picture for you. Wouldn't that be great if God blessed you with something like that? I mean, I feel that, don't you? Now, here's the thing, though. You think the blessing of a vineyard is like luxury, it's a yacht, it's homes. Now, let me say this. There's nothing wrong with that. If you get a yacht, I'll break the thing over the bow, pray a prayer, and we'll go out together. I'm all for it, okay? But that's not what this is about. The vineyard blessing is not about luxury, it's about legacy. It's a blessing that is so profound, it spills over the years of your life into your loved ones and into the people that only you'll ever be able to see it fully in eternity. Jesus talked about it in Matthew 21, verse 33. He says, now listen to another story. A certain landowner planted a vineyard, built a wall around it, dug a pit for pressing out the grape juice, and built a lookout tower. Then he leased the vineyard to tenant farmers and moved to another country. And at the time of the grape harvest, he sent his servants to collect their share of crops. So obviously this is the gospel. This is Jesus who came and did everything so that we could live, and then he entrusts us with our life, and he leaves to another country preparing a place for us, but he expects our lives to be lived according to him receiving a share of it. Okay, so this is obviously the gospel. But this is a bigger deal than that because a vineyard was a cornerstone of a community at this time. I mean, it employed a lot of people who did various tasks, and it also was something that touched every bit of the community. Wine was central to not only celebrations, but central to religious ritual. And so it was a big deal. Now, because at this time in Israel's history, wealth was consolidated into a few. There wasn't a lot of people who owned. It wasn't like today where you could go get a loan and then go buy a piece of land and start your own vineyard. Wealth was consolidated to a very few families, and they were the only ones. And so your family, if you didn't inherit a vineyard, you would never be able to actually be a part of running a vineyard. And so for someone to come to someone who cannot in any way, shape, or form provide this for themselves and say, I'm going to let you run this, it was an incredible opportunity. Not only was it materially, you could control your own wages, but listen, it also allowed you to impact every person in the region, and listen, it allowed you to employ your children, which were always family trades, and it allowed you to leave them an inheritance, because if you stewarded it well, you could continue it with the family line. This was a game-changing opportunity that could not be contained in one lifetime. It would spread for many. And it was available to anybody who was willing to steward it according to the owner's values. Listen, I've been in a lot of church services, and I've seen a lot of buckets passed. I've seen people drop in checks. I've seen people drop in jewelry. I've seen people drop in wads of cash, and I've seen people drop in cigarettes. I've seen people drop in everything. You know what I've never seen? I have never seen anyone put the bucket down and step into it, putting them whole selves in it. But that's exactly what God's looking for if he's going to trust you with a vineyard. He's looking for someone who's willing not just to give money, but somebody who will give themselves. And I'm just telling you that I've lived long enough to see this. God is looking for people that he can entrust incredible opportunity to. I believe that God has a conversation consistently that says, I am looking for people who I can give wealth and influence and opportunity to, and that they will live with it according to my values. And if they'll keep my values, I will make this outcome be so grand, it can't be contained in their own generation. It will spill through eternity. I read recently a story about a man named George Frederick Handel. He was a famous composer, wrote 42 different operas, 29 different ratios, almost 140 different cantatas. He's probably considered one of the greatest composers of all time. But at 56 years old in 1742, he was at the end of his composing life. As a matter of fact, he had had a stroke, which left his right hand unable to write. He was in debt, and he was in a severe depression. But it was in that same year that he sat down and locked himself away to write a new composition. And it was this last work that actually makes him so well known. It's this last work that actually you would know him by. He sat down to write, and 3 weeks later, he walks out with 259 pages of a composition known as Messiah, Handel's Messiah. Now, here's the thing about that is it's beautifully written. You've heard pieces of it. The first act opens with the coming of Christ. The middle act proclaims the passion of Christ, and it's the last act that you're most familiar with where it proclaims that he will reign forever and ever and ever more. But what made this work the most famous is that the last page has 3 letters that he had only ever written on this work. And the 3 letters are S-D-G. S-D-G. And they stand for Soli Deo Gloria. To your glory alone, O God. Now, in 1742, Handel's Messiah debuted in Dublin, Ireland, to a crowd full of people, and they were mesmerized by the music. But it was more than just a concert. It was actually a benefit concert because he wrote SDG, because those 3 letters on the bottom of this composition, he gave the profits away of the opening night. He didn't just give them away, though. They were actually to set 142 indentured servants free. That concert itself raised today's wage $86,000. But not only that, he then gave all the proceeds that would follow to Founding Hospital, and their mission was based in Matthew 25, to care for the sick, to feed the poor, and to especially reach out to children. Listen, most experts agree that Handel's Messiah is the most played piece of music in Western history. Its success and its acclaim have outlasted Handel by centuries. So I want to ask you a question. Do you think that Handel's Messiah is so prolific that its success has lasted centuries because he wrote a good piece of music? Or do you think it's because from its beginning, SDG was on the bottom of the page? I sense such a desire of God to give a vineyard blessing to people today, to overflow your legacy into your children and your children's children, to do more with your life than you could ever do in your own. But it requires on your life to write SDG. For your glory alone, O God. And to those people, they receive a blessing that spills into eternity.